Hello and welcome. We appreciate that you could join us, and I do hope you are having a productive day. I'm your host, Charles Collegy, the Security Analyst for Accelerated Strategies Group. Today's DevOps.com webinar is brought to you by Everbridge. And today, I have with me Eric Maxwell, Solutions Architect at Everbridge. And he will be speaking on improving pipeline efficiency. If you could please introduce yourself to the audience, Eric.
Thanks, Charles. Hey, everyone, and I'll go into a little more detail about myself in a moment, but thank you.
All right, so Eric, I know you're pretty eager to get in and fill the audience on how a CI/CD pipeline can help DevOps maximize productivity by improving information sharing. However, the meat of today's webinar must be delayed a few moments as I handle the housekeeping items. Now, if you will note that this webinar is being recorded. Later, it will be available on demand. So you should receive an email with the link, but at any time you can go to devops.com and gain access to this and all of the archived on-demand webinars that are available. So feel free to peruse our webinar library. Now, a few comments on the big marker platform we use. First, on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see the chat button. This feature is designed to allow everyone online to interact during today's event. You can say hello, let us know where you're from. But more importantly, we want to hear your immediate feedback. We want you to provide comments. We are really curious of what you have to say about what Eric's talking about and the subject in question. So we want this to be more interactive. Now, for questions, we ask that you not use the chat, because sometimes they can get lost if there's a lot of activity going on in the chat box. So please place questions within the Q&A window, which you can access using the Q&A tab, which is right next to the chat tab. And we'll try to answer as many of your submitted questions as possible before the end of today's session. Now, if we're not able to get to them, I'm sure that Everbridge will be following up with you. And lastly, you will see a handout button. Now, for today, there is a lot of information to download, so please take a look at what Everbridge has made available, including today's deck. Now, the most important housekeeping item is that at the end of today's webinar, we will be awarding 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stay with us until the end to see if you are selected. So now it is time to jump into today's session. So the floor is yours, Eric.
Thanks, Charles. All right. So today I want to talk about, like as Charles was saying, improving pipeline efficiency. And I'm actually going to focus on how can we do that with enhanced notifications and response automation. So as I said, let me about myself a little more. I am a solutions architect with xMatters Everbridge. So for about 1.5 years, and just why I say xMatters Everbridge. So I've started out with xMatters, and actually Everbridge acquired us about early May. So was that about 2 months ago? So that is why. So anyways, Everbridge now. And before that, I was previously about 10 years in the development as several different roles, not at the same time. I was product manager for a while, architect, and also managed and was part of an SRE team. So so before I get in, I'm going to actually provide a demo. But before we get into that, I want to go through the concepts and things that I want to get through on the demo. So, we're all trying to, we have this balancing act, right? We want to innovate faster because we want to provide products and services that our customers want to see. We want to improve in disruptive technologies and give our customers value. But we tend to see lots of issues come up from that, right? While we're doing that, and maybe not faster, issues come up faster. Well, they'll come faster, but because we are moving faster, we tend to see them more often. Now, from my experience and observations, what tends to happen in the companies now is we're still very focused, production focused, which is, I mean, makes a lot of sense. There's reasons for that. I've listed several here, and there's a direct customer impact, right? I mean, if there's a production issue, impacts a customer, they're not going to be happy about that, and we want to get that resolved as quickly as possible, all right? And because of that, it's high visibility within our organizations to make sure that those things get resolved. And of course, there's immediate losses. It's pretty easy to calculate, revenue losses or even penalties that we incur because of production issues. But what is the impact of pipeline issues or any inefficiencies in our pipelines to our value as well, right? To our customers and to our organization. So first, customer value. As I mentioned before, we want to provide, new updates, new features, updates to our services and things like that for our customers. We want to provide more value. That's what they expect, right? They buy our products, our services. They expect to see improvements in value over that time, right? Management confidence. So this is within our organization. If there's lots of issues and inefficiencies in our pipelines, it can cause issues with our timelines and things. And management starts to lose confidence in the team that we're going to provide things in a timely manner and provide a confidence in our product as well. And of course, the team itself, confidence within the team and transparency. We start to lose that confidence in our commitments. Are we going to be able to meet these commitments? And so efficiency in our pipeline and issues there can cause problems there. And of course, if there's this confidence, loss in confidence for our commitments, the transparency starts to go down as well. As issues arise, they'll be less transparent about letting those rise up and people see those, try to cover them up, right? And then individual contributor morale. Individuals want to be, developers, engineers, they want to be productive, they want to provide value. And if there's these issues and inefficiencies in our pipelines that are causing, that there's delays and things that they're working on because of it, their morale is going to go down. That also causes turnover. So these can impact our cost in the long run. But there's also this foundational impact, right? So we have, I've listed a few kind of in an order here. We have, our major production incidents, right? These are usually very high visibility, very customer impacting type things. We have our just kind of lower grade production incidents, major bugs that maybe been found, new features and bugs that we're trying to get out, or minor things we're trying to fix. And then of course we have our pipeline here at the bottom and issues and efficiencies and how those can affect. I mean, that is a foundational piece that can affect all of these, right? Can affect all of these things above. And to try to a little more detail on that, this is, I'm sure, a diagram everyone's probably familiar with. But typically what happens, right, is right around here. This is where we're dealing with production issues and mitigation, resolution of those issues, right? But if we, within our flow here, right? So here we may be able to mitigate certain things, but typically in a lot of cases, in order to resolve that in a permanent way, you're going to go through this process, right? We're going to create a fix. It's going to be build, test. It's going to go through our CI/CD process. So inefficiencies here are going to cause issues with getting these resolutions and fix into production as well. So if we can make simple changes in these areas to improve our efficiency, it will also impact our production environments as well, right? So some of the key things that we want to improve on, right? And if you'll, part of what I want you to see here is that we're kind of, you'll see these concepts of what we're focused on in production. We're kind of shifting left, right? There's all these things, we're always talking about shifting left, about shifting security to the left and all these things, right? So kind of this incident process kind of management, we can take some of those concepts, shift those left. So some of these keys improvement, involving the right people. This is something we do in production all the time. We want to make sure we're involving the right people. Same thing we want to do in our pipelines. when there's issues or there's actions that need to be taken by a human, we want to make sure we're involving the right people. We want to drive ownership and responsibility. If there's not a sense of ownership and responsibility, then things take longer to resolve or action to be taken, because someone else is, everyone's busy and they're just going to, if everyone's notified, they're going to pass it off. Providing context. So we want to provide as much context, right? We want to help out when we're providing information. We want to provide as much context as possible. And of course, we want to keep stakeholders involved. And in this case, will be people like our just other team members, our product owners, our scrum masters, all the team members, right? We want to keep them informed. And then automation. Of course, we want to automate these things. And I'm not talking about the CI/CD process itself, orchestration. I'm just talking about this process in general, and you'll see more of what I'm talking about in a moment. So I've got a few example scenarios here. So this is our pipeline. I've just taken out that more of the CI/CD portion of that diagram we had there and stretched it out. And I've simplified it a little. So we have our build and test stages. And of course, we all have build failures and test failures, right? And how can we make these more efficient? So I've had in the past, I've had experience where you'd have pipeline failures, right? And notifications would go out to our team. And this was the whole team. We'd get a notification. And I would say 95 to at least 95% of the time, those issues there weren't really issues with the pipeline. It was doing what it was supposed to do, that there was some tests or, the build, something failed in the build, there was a dependency change or something that caused an issue. Nothing wrong with the pipeline. And a developer engineer needed to go in. They had made some update, and it just, once we ran it through the pipeline, there was some issue found and it needed to be fixed. But what would happen is we get this notification, the developers are busy, and they're like, well, okay, somebody will check that out, and if they need me, they'll let me know. Well, then the SREs and things are looking at that. In this case, we're involved in maintaining the orchestration of the pipeline and all the tools that were integrated. And well, we're like, well, usually this is a development problem, and they'll check it out. And if there's actually a pipeline problem, then they'll let us know. So it ended up no one's doing anything, because there's no one that's targeted and no one is taking ownership of it or sees that they're responsible for that at that point, until finally their work is held up and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And then they start to pull in people, try to understand what's going on and get it fixed. And finally, it's like, oh, there was a dependency change and looks like it's causing a integration problem here. So we need to go update. So anyways, the other piece of it is where we have decisions, where we have a human decision or a human action that needs to take place. So I know we try to move as agile as possible and automate things as much as possible, but there's still, I still see customers that still have, for various reasons, there's still human interaction that's required. One of the obvious ones is approvals before production. That's still very common, even though you're using an agile way. And when I say approvals, not necessarily, it could be a deployment. It could be just feature toggles that need to be enabled, but there still needs to be approvals before those go out, because there's certain things that have to happen, especially in larger corporations. This has to happen because there's a lot of departments and things like marketing and things that have to be on board and ready to go when those features are available. But then also back in our teams, there's human decisions that have to happen. I've worked in my past experience. I was working on a product that it processed a large amount of data. And so in order for us to do our integration testing and performance testing, we needed it to be, very similar to production. So it had a large amount of data, and it wasn't very cost effective for us to have lots of environments or even to be able to spin up ephemeral environments, because it would just take so long to get that data available in those environments. So we had several environments for testing. So whenever it got to a certain point in the pipeline, there was a human decision, usually in this case was our QA engineers, and they would have to make a decision on what environment it wanted you wanted the pipeline to load that release into for testing. So how can we, speed these things up, right? So some of the common practice, and I'll caveat this, that, it depends on the tool that you're using. So some of the things I'm saying, the tool you're using may handle this well, it may not, but usually I've used several different tools, orchestration, CI/CD orchestration tools, and depending on the feature set, there's various things we can do to improve them. But typically, this is what we see. When there's in the orchestration tool, it's going to either send an email or it's going to post to a chat. And the problems with this is that in most cases, they're not very targeted, or there's a limited ability to target them. So, you might do things like, I'm just going to target the developers, or I'm just going to target the QA in this case, things like that. But beyond that, that's about all you can do. And then posting the chat, similar thing, right? You're posting to a channel that there's several people on. But how do you know who has ownership of it? Are they going to reply to the email and let everyone know? Are they going to, are you relying on that person to respond? But also, who decides on who's taking responsibility, right? So that goes back to that issue where if everyone gets it, everyone's going to say, I'm busy, so someone else is going to look at it and they'll let me know if they need me, right? And then limited context. So usually there's limited context in that. Coming from the orchestration tool, it'll have the context of what it knows in its perspective, right, in the pipeline. And then stakeholders, we need to make sure that we're keeping them up to date, but we don't necessarily need to send them all the information, and they don't necessarily need to be on the same channel if we're working on an issue. Collaboration, stakeholders don't necessarily need to be there. And then automating, right? We want to automate this. So what we're going to do, this goes back to those key improvements again. So one is, again, targeting specific groups and users, right? And to add to that, we need to be able to track that progress. So track that, if we've targeted someone, have they responded? If they responded, how does everyone know that they responded and that they're taking action or not taking action? So we need to so we have both these together, helps us build ownership and responsibility. We want to provide as much context as possible. We want to keep our stakeholders informed. Again, this could just be our overall team, could be people outside the team if we need to. And then, of course, automating. All right. So I just wanted to check, make sure we have any. So again, if you have any questions, you can post those in the Q&A, and I will try to stop, or Charles will let me know if there's a question up related to what I'm talking about. So please, if you have questions, just post them into the Q&A. All right, so I'm going to go into the demo now. So just give me 1 second. I need to actually kick my pipeline off. All right. Okay. All right. All right, so before I jump into that, I'll just go into what I'm going to talk about. Or what the demo is going to cover. So the demo is going to have 3 cases. First, I'm going to have a test failure in my pipeline, and then I will have an environment selection. So this goes into a human decision, right, that needs to be made, and then a deployment approval. Again, kind of a decision, but very common still. And then the tools I'm using are Jenkins, GitHub, Jira, Slack, and then of course I'm going to use Xmatters in my demo. So let's see here. Let me switch over. All right, so I'm in Slack. So you'll see here I have several channels. I have a build channel, a release channel, and deploy. So as my pipeline moves along, it's posting messages. And all of these channels are being updated by Xmatters for me as it's receiving signals from Jenkins. So we'll see that our build has just started here, and it's actually posted a reply here for us. And it's let us know that there has been a build issue. So let me pull up, give me 1 second. I'm going to pull my phone up here and show you I've received a notification. All right, so you'll see it's very similar. I've got the in our alert here in our build alert, it's let us know there's a unit test failure. I've received a notification. So what's happened here though is that based on information from Jenkins, the notification, I've notified in this case, it's called the dev team 1, but I'm a member of that team. And we're actually using some features within Xmatters to our on-call scheduling and escalation so that we will, we're not notifying the whole team, we're notifying specific people. So in this case, I'm the person, we'll say on call, but don't make that stigma, because that's a stigma I find within production. But basically, I'm using a round robin type escalation or scheduling so that the next failure that happens, it will go to someone else in my team, but it will escalate through that team if that person does not respond. Okay, so I'm using the Xmatters app in this case, but Xmatters, so that's another piece of it, is multimodal notifications. So Xmatters will send notifications. I can push through our mobile app. I can use email. I can use a text message. I could even send a voice alert. Of course, text message and voice, you're not going to have all this information we have in the notification. So I would say typically when customers do that, one is very severe, or it's been a long time and no one has responded. And typically it will reference the email or the push notification for more detail in this type of case. So in my notification, I do have the test failure. I have the details from it. I've already, Xmatters has created a Jira issue for me to track this issue. There's the build details. I have links to the tests and changes and artifacts. There's the commit information. We can see that I have a file, the changes that were made in this commit related to this build, right? So I have all this. So that's the context, right? So we're pulling information. So the idea is, especially around the commit information, I'm not getting that from Jenkins. Jenkins just let me know, I know what branch and things it's coming from, but I'm actually Xmatters is making a query to GitHub to find out this extra information for me. So if I had other tools I want to integrate and I wanted to pull information, I could pull that information as well. So I'm actually going to respond. Actually, before I do that, I want to show you, I do have my build pipeline running, and you'll see there's the unit test, and it had failed, and it's waiting for my reply. And then let me refresh here. Oh, there it went. I do have my Jira issue that was created for me. All right, so it has that same information. Again, we can customize what information is put into Jira, or even our notifications or Slack, or if you're using MS Teams, whatever tool that you're using. And you'll see here Xmatters has posted that it did notify the dev team 1 that this was an issue. So I'm actually going to tell it to continue the build. I'm just going to say in this case, I looked at it and the value that was found was correct, but I noticed that the test case just needs to be updated. So I'm just going to let it go ahead and continue with the pipeline. So let's see here. We'll go to Slack. We'll see here. There it has, it's posted that I continued. So here's going back to our stakeholders, right? So our rest of our team, this could be, if we're posting somewhere else, or even if you use some type of status page information in your pipeline for a broader audience. But we're letting our team know, one is that I was the one that continued it, right? And that now it's complete. So we can see that it has completed. I think it even, if I refresh here, it's actually adding some comments. Yeah, that Eric, so that I decided to continue that build. All right, so now it's going into the release process. So this is building the release for us. So I just got another notification. So you also keep in mind that a lot of these, I'm the only person here in the demo, but a lot of cases, this will be going to multiple different teams, right? So maybe the test failure, unit test failure would go to a dev team, or even the person that had created it, that commit. But in this case, maybe the test environment, now we're notifying the QA team, but in my case, I'm the only person, so I'm getting all the notifications. So I'm going to actually select environment 2. Dismiss this one, so let me know. But I've just responded that I want to use environment 2 for testing. So in just a moment, our pipeline will continue. It's going to go through the rest of the stages here, and we'll go into the rest of our deployment. But we also have a release channel, right? Like I was thinking. So we've put in our releases. There's our services. There's that service we just built, 24, right? Yeah, build 24. And we've created our release. So now it says that there it is. It let everyone know that I selected test environment 2 to run this test for this release. Second. There we are. It's about done. All right. Okay. So now it's going to go into our deployment phase. All right. So now in just a moment there, it's going to send out a request for approvals, right? So you'll see that here. We have our deployment stage. So once it's started, so there's our deployment that has started for release 15. One second, let's just take a moment. Oops, sorry, I don't want to go there yet. Come to that in just a moment. There we go. So now it's gathering approvals. So let's go back to our, so there we are, product management. But I was also, in this case, I need to keep track of this, right? So in my case, I'm just using Jira again. It will create a release approval for me. So there, come on Jira, there it is. So I have this release for approval. It just has basic information in here. Again, you can customize what you want to include in something like this. But I have another notification here on my phone, right? So you'll see it has that same information. There's the link to the record in Jira, the build information, again, the commit information. But again, you can customize what you would like to include. So I'm going to approve it. All right, so that will continue our pipeline. Right, it takes a moment, but it'll, once that's approved. But we'll also see that our, it will, there, I've approved it. And it's actually put it into the done state. So we'll see if I refresh, it'll move it over here to the approved state. So there's our, so XMatters automatically did this for us. It took the approval, it's putting it in the record for us and actually moved our record into the approved state now that everyone has approved it. And now our pipeline should, yep, is complete, right? So now we've gone through that whole process. In the whole process at this, in my demo, I've ran everything directly from the notification. Yes, I was in Jenkins. I was using it to show you what was going on in Jira. But in reality, I didn't have to. I could have just done it from the notification. You may not necessarily do everything with a notification, but of course we had all the information we had needed there, links to our issues, links to our Jenkins jobs and things like that we wanted to get to quickly if we needed to, right? All right, so now we completed. Let me check. Are there any questions
Eric,
so far?
Yeah, yep. Eric, we got one that was in the chat line. So right now I've seen it. So GB wanted to know how you created the Jira ticket. What sort of authorization was needed to be able to create the ticket in that Jira project?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So actually, I was about to go into XMatters just to show some of the configuration, how that worked. This is Flow Designer. So this is our automation orchestration tool within XMatters. It's our low code tool. And this is where that triggers were coming in from Jenkins, and based on information. So you'll see I have different information coming from Jenkins. I'm doing different, I'm following different paths to build things. So as far as Jira goes, it will, here's where I'm creating that issue. I have a step, and that step uses an endpoint. In this case, Jira. So if I go to my endpoints, you'll see that I have several to connect to the different ones, but it's using basic authentication. So what we would need is it has to have a user, and in this case, Jira requires an API key and not a password. You wouldn't actually use your password, but you would have to have a username and API key, and that user would have to have permissions. Whatever user you use with Xmatters, it would have to have permissions to create and update issues in the project that you that you want those issues created and updated in. So, all right. Hopefully that answered your question. I don't know. If you have if that didn't answer, just let follow up in there with a comment.
Yeah, no follow up right now. So
okay,
we can keep going. And GB, if you want, well, he did. He commented that you answered it, and thanks.
All right, awesome. Okay. So while I'm here, I'll go ahead and go through some of this. But yes, like I said, the trigger comes in based on information in here. This is where some of the stages started. I'm posting things in the Slack. So same thing with the other ones. Slack, there's an endpoint. We have to authenticate it with the user. And based on that user's permissions, we can do several different things. I'm creating an update or posting to a channel. I was posting to threads as well. We can do things like delete channels. So we have customers that will. This is more in a production environment where I've seen it where on incident-based things where if it's like a major incident, they'll create a channel dynamically for that incident for collaboration. And then once the incident's closed, we will pull the chat history and put it in the incident and delete that channel, things like that. Jenkins as well, being able to query Jenkins and update Jenkins. So this is calling back. This is where we're making those the callbacks back to Jenkins to continue the build or even fail the build if we decided to stop it, those types of things. So yeah, all right. And then another key piece. So that's how. And then of course I forgot GitHub here where we're pulling information about the commit. But of course, if you have other tools, we have other tools here. We have, our logic tools and different pieces for Xmatters. And then we do have, you can build custom ones, and that's either copying from one or if you want to start from scratch. And then we also have a whole library on our GitHub created by our customers and our consulting team and things like that are available for importing into your system as well. But if we have a lot of customers that have, some custom tools and things or APIs they want to integrate with. So that's great. You can build custom steps that you can use to just, once they're built, they're just drag and drop. And if you saw, they just have, inputs and, you have to define your endpoint that you're going to connect to. And then of course, outputs that you can use, and outputs are information that's shared with steps farther up the path. So, and we have various triggers as well. So I'm using Jenkins in this case. I've used Azure DevOps, some other tools I was trying to think of, but yeah. And again, the integration will be slightly different depending on the tool, because some of these tools, like let's say approvals. I know I've used Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps has an approval mechanism built in, but I've done an integration where we've actually, instead of sending emails directly from Azure DevOps, we actually send those through Xmatters, and we use the Xmatters either sending an email or a notification, push notification or text, whatever it is, through Xmatters. The user can respond from that notification, and we can actually, instead of them having to log in to Azure DevOps to do an approval, they can approve it right from the notification, and Xmatters will let Azure know that has been approved. So there's different ways to do it depending on the tools that you're using. But one of the key things that I talked about, we call it, you have like, we'll talk about on-call schedules. But one of those that kind of gets a stigma around being a production thing. But if you keep in mind, lots of dev teams are very remote or geographically spread, right? So I have my development team here, and if I look, I actually have a couple of shifts. I have my India team and my US team. So, if there's an issue in the pipeline or something that the dev team needs to take care of, why am I going to notify my India team when they're not around, that they're asleep? There's no need to notify them, right? And I have my on-call schedule, well, I say on-call, but my rotation based on those teams. In this case, it's the same because I only have it. But I can have whoever I want and however long I want to wait between notifying the next person. So in this case, if an incident comes up, it comes up to me. I don't have a rotation set for myself because I want to get the notifications every time, but I could set a rotation on every event. So every time there's a new notification, it rotates. So we're load balancing those notifications in our team, right? So, but it still builds that responsibility because I'm going to receive that notification. And if I don't respond, then it's going to go to Marty. And there's actually a record of that if I don't respond. But I could also escalate it if I'm busy, right? We have the ability to say, I want to escalate to the next person. If I'm busy, you can immediately do that, right? So that's where teams come in handy. And then we were talking about multimodal notifications. So actually, well, I'm going to go to Marty. So if I go to devices, all right, so Marty, we can have multiple devices. So like we were having the escalations within a team based on between users, you can also escalate between devices. So a user can have multiple devices. So we have our Android phone, which is the Android app. You could have a work, like work, home email, whatever that is. It could be a text, SMS message, or a voice, but we can set that up and you can have delays. So if I get notified, I want you to try me on I want you to send me an email. And if I don't respond, then I want you to send me a push, or maybe I want you to send push and email at the same time. And if I don't respond to those within 5 or 10 minutes, then I want you to send me a text message, however you want to set that up, right? So the key here is just that, we're trying to take some of these, we want to take some of these concepts from a production environment where we're trying to build efficiency in resolving an incident. You want to taking those same concepts and shifting them left into your environment, into your development, your CI/CD pipelines, and using that same type of concept, right? We want to be more efficient in delivering a notification, targeting certain people to drive ownership and responsibility. We want to provide context, as much context, because we don't want them having, we want to reduce toil, right? Whole thing we're trying to do is increase velocity, right? So we want to reduce that toil and provide as much as we can. We want to provide responsibility, but we want to provide those people with the tools and links and information that they need up front. So that is pretty much it on the demo. That was a quick demo there. Of course, this could be with any of the orchestration tools. I use Jira, whatever you're using. I've used, like I said, Azure DevOps boards and things like that as well. And of course, I use Slack. You could use MS Teams or whatever chat tool that you're using, right? So, all right. So do we have any other questions in there, Charles?
So we have a good amount of questions. So if you are you done with the demo and we can jump into questions?
Yep, we can jump into questions. Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right. So let's first, hey, you had a lot of luck with the online demo. No real glitches, so that's great.
Yeah.
So before we get into the Q&A, though, Everbridge would like to know if you are interested in learning more about the CEM for digital platforms. So we're just going to push out just this short polling question here to help them determine if you're interested in some additional information. So just take a moment for that. And I hope everyone agreed that with me that this was very informative. I definitely picked up the nuggets of information about, especially, ownership is so important with so many processes that we have, and to having the automation available to communicate is really important. And that's really what some of these questions are all about. So I'm just going to let that poll just stay up there for just another moment, and then we'll go to the questions. But I promised Jacqueline to do her question, but I'm going to just change just a bit, Jacqueline, and just allow Eric to follow up with GB because he mentioned that he just made a comment that your question was that basically a user needs to be set up and provisioned as you for the I think the authorization needed to create the ticket. Is that correct?
Correct. So yeah, you would need a user provisioned in Jira for that. I mean, it could be a user that's already there. I mean, I would typically, you're not going to want to integrate with an actual user, because if that user is not for some reason leaves or their permissions change, yeah, you could break the integration. But yeah, you would have to provision a user or someone to connect into Jira.
Okay. All right. So sorry, Jacqueline, for pushing you just a pinch behind, but she had a very interesting question, and exactly was followed up. Walt had a similar one, so it's kind of two-parter. So let me go through it, Eric. And the first one is how does Teams know that someone is working on an event? So is there an acknowledgement that goes out to all members? And if another team has to be paged, does it automatically update the tracking? And she followed that up, and Walt kind of mentioned the same thing, is, if the first notification is not acknowledged within a certain amount of time,
right?
Is there escalation? So Walt was kind of looking at, is there, some amount of time, the same thing, when management has to be brought into the situation if people aren't responsive, and how would that be done?
Right. So again, this is going back to the group. So there's two levels, at least within X Matters, we have two levels of escalation, right? So one is within the group, right? And that's handled by the different shifts. So here I have my US and India team shifts. So I have my escalation. And so in this case, I'm the first person notified, and then it waits 5 minutes, and then Marty is notified. I can add more, but you were talking about like group or some management type escalation. I could add another team here if I wanted, and I can actually escalate to another team if I wanted. And what will happen is it will, and we could say, well, if this is a management team, we can categorize this as a management and this is a peer escalation. But once we escalate to this team, it's actually going to follow that. It's not going to notify everyone in that team. It's going to follow that team's escalation policy as well. So if it's a management team, however that escalation is set up, it will follow that same one. So we could escalate through it. And then if we're setting up rotations, we can actually define who is in the rotation and who's not. So if we always wanted this group to be last always, no matter, we can just have Marty and Eric rotating between events and things like that. So hopefully that answers that question. Is
there any ability to set a time period, like if you don't respond in a certain period of time?
That's what this wait is, right? So if I don't respond within 5 minutes, it's going to escalate to Marty. Okay. So that's where in my notification, which is now gone, where I have that acknowledge. Actually, maybe if I show it will, that's when it will escalate, right? So I could set this to whatever I need it to be. 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, however long I want it to be. But yeah, if I don't respond, whatever this value is, if I don't respond, it's going to escalate to Marty. And then if Marty doesn't respond in 15 minutes, it's going to escalate to this SRE team, and then they'll get notified, and then it'll follow their escalation policy since that's a group. But I could have more users in here as well, right? But then on top of that, though, we do have, like I was showing in the users, okay, I don't want to save that. You have your devices, and there's the same type of escalation, right? So here I have Marty's phone, and it's a 1 minute escalation, but I could set it to 5. But maybe I want to notify his phone and his email at the same time. So now, since there's no delay, they'll get notified. You'll get a notification on both. But then after 5 minutes, if he doesn't respond to either one of those, then it will contact this Android phone too. After 5 minutes, it'll send a notification there. So it's all based on responses. And then I was also talking about how, so one of the things is you saw that I got several notifications, and the responses in those notifications, you can customize those to be whatever you want. And you can name them. They could be named. They could have flows connected to them, whatever flow you want. And actually, let me go back into the flow and I'll show you what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that kind of follows up what Jacqueline followed up about targets can acknowledge doing various means. So you kind of pointed out. Yep. So it's Slack, text, email, client, mobile app. So it kind of can flow through those choices then.
Right. Exactly. So and multimodal, and that was the idea. Multimodal notifications. So you'll see here's one of the responses, right? So there was that build failure notification. This is where it actually goes out, and these are the responses associated to that notification. So I do have these flows, and this is where it's updating, letting Jenkins either know to continue the build or stop it, and I'm posting things into Slack and adding comments to the Jira issue. But I have this continue build. Actually, let me go in and edit the responses just so you can see what I'm talking about. So you can have as many responses as you want. I have continue build. I've set that if I respond, I want to end the action. So what that does is you saw where the notification went away after I responded. But there's several different options: record, stop notifying my use. So we have different ones, but we could set up one that if it was like an issue, lots of times in like an issue scenario where it's an incident type of scenario, you would have like an escalate or a reject or something like that. And we would actually set this to escalate. And what that does is if I'm the person on call and I got notified in that escalation policy, but I received the notification and I'm busy for some reason, I can't respond to it. I can't get to that issue or whatever it is. I can select the escalate option or whatever you want to call it, reject option. But if it has this escalate action, it's actually going to ignore that delay and notify the next person immediately. So there's other options you have as well. So,
yeah. I think Jacqueline again followed that up about that escalation continuing through first, second. So it's really pretty much how you set that up.
Yep.
It appears on so it gives you the flexibility to kind of control that flow of escalation and contacts and things of that sort. So.
The other thing you get out of it too is you get that, right? And if you're using just native notifications, like just sending an email to a distribution group or even users, the other thing you get out of using a tool like Xmatters is we also handle things like, if somebody's out, right? They're on vacation and they're in there, they can indicate that they're on vacation, right? And it'll actually take them out of the rotation or take them out of the notification, and they can put in a replacement that says, hey, since while I'm out, then notify this person. Or if they don't put a replacement, it'll actually just notify the next person in that list immediately while they're out, right? So you get things like that as well. So
Right. And the last one, for, I think, Jacqueline, and not really sure exactly what Idaho is, but does it integrate with Idaho, IDAO groups?
Idaho groups? I'm not sure what that is either. I would have to.
Okay. Well, we can research that one in the future.
I would say I'm not 100% sure what that is, but I will say, Xmatters can integrate with a wide variety of tools. Like I said, we have our custom steps. You can also have custom triggers. We have all these triggers that are built in around, but then we have, you can build custom ones. And it's quite easy to build a trigger. So even if we don't have an integration for a tool, it's really not that difficult to build one, especially, if it has an API, it's quite easy to create an integration for it. Or if it can send a webhook, having it send a signal to Xmatters.
Okay, because there's two other questions that are kind of similar in those veins. Tyrone wanted to know that his organization uses a different tool than Jenkins, and can it already and it can already send notifications about failure status and even handle approval. So
right.
Why would I need the Xmatters platform?
Right. So that goes back to, I had mentioned like Azure DevOps. So Azure DevOps has the ability to do approvals, things like that, right? But it is sending out emails. So you lose that one of course, like I was saying, you're losing that multimodal capability of sending more than, notifications in more than one way. You also lose the escalation and scheduling. I guess in case of an approval, it just depends on how you want to handle that. But and of course the load balancing type things that you don't necessarily get out of those two, natively in those tools. So it just depends on the tool that you're using, right, and what their capabilities are. But so in this case, I'm actually, so just to be clear, in Jenkins, it's sending something within the job. to let, when it fails, it has, I'm using a job definition file, but anyways, Jenkins file to define what I want it to do. And one of those things is if there's a failure, I want it to send a notification or a webhook to X matters. So in the case of something like Azure DevOps, it has hooks for those already there. And we just have to configure it to send it to X matters in those types of cases. So,
okay.
And one thing I would like, one is the other thing to expand on that too is abstracting some of this from your CI/CD pipeline, right? You know, I've done a lot here within this flow that you could, I mean, there's things you could do. I mean, I could go into Jenkins and I could build it into my flow, or into my CI/CD pipeline to do a lot of these things, but I'm adding complexity to that pipeline, right? And that actually causes more potential for that pipeline to, you know, have failures and someone trying to figure out, you know, where that is, right? Where here it's just sending a signal to X matters, it's handling it, and then using, in our case, you know, using our flow designer tool that's, you know, pretty easy visual. We have a lot of ways to be able to determine if something goes wrong, but you're abstracting that away from your CI/CD pipeline, right?
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
Great. No, go ahead. No, Jacqueline followed up. I think there was a little typo, so it wasn't Idaho, it was LDAP.
Oh, right. Okay.
LDAP.
Yeah, LDAP. So, trying to think how we do that. I mean, we do have single sign-on capability, groups. So X Matters has. So I see what they're asking. So X Matters, we have our API that we can sync. So we do have some tools already built to sync with different types of tools. I think LDAP, I would have to look, but we typically have it listed on our site if we need to. But yeah, if it's not there, it's quite easy to build a sync to import those things through our API as well. If you want to import like groups and users.
The lightweight directory, other than AD,
yep.
other than
yep.
Active Directory. So
yep.
I suspect it does. We've got an interesting question from Sally, kind of on my little more on my area since it's security. She wants to know if you're performing tasks outside of the CI/CD process, such as a security tool that's monitoring the code repositories or things of that sort. Can X Matters be brought in to follow communications or handle who has ownership and escalating things? And
so definitely, I mean, it would be, definitely. So it'd be very similar integration, right? Most of those tools will send out a notification. I would say most tools like that that are doing some kind of security monitoring or security, tools, or even just monitoring tools in general, they already have the capability of sending out webhooks. If they can send out a webhook, it can trigger X Matters to do whatever flow you want, notify and send out and gather information and send notifications, just like I'm doing here with Jenkins. It's pretty much the same process. But yeah, that's a very common scenario as well.
All right. So that's pretty much our time, I think, Eric. We have no more questions. And hopefully everyone got their information. I think the communications tools that this have is really something that can help speed these processes. But now it's time for me to select, or at least announce, the selected attendees for the $25 Amazon gift cards. And so they are Jerry A., David S., Lance K., and Mark S. Now you'll be receiving an email from the email that you registered for the webinar. And if you're like me and you have 7 emails, you got to kind of figure out which one it is. And make sure you check your spam filter if you don't hear from us on how to retrieve your gift. I want to again thank Eric Maxwell, our sponsor Everbridge, and to you, our audience, for taking an hour out of your day to spend it with us. So goodbye, and may the fickle finger of fate be kind to you.
Thanks, everyone.